I'm sure many of you are used to the new McDonald's, the one that's been remodeled, and you're also used to the McCafe. But have you ever wondered why they started remodeling the restaurants? The first McCafe in America opened in Chicago in May 2001, marking the beginning of the chain's expansion. Over the last 5 years, McDonald's has started remodeling all its restaurants in America. I'm sure that now, you're all wondering when was the last time you set foot in an old McDonald's. You can ask anyone who knows about market research, and they will tell you that something is wrong. McDonald's lost a lot of money by doing this. It's a fact. The new furniture design and layout don't really attract new customers. It's impossible for the McCafes to sell coffee at that price and make a profit. Comparing the prices of McCafe and Starbucks illustrates my point. McDonald's shareholders wanted to give the restaurant a classier, more adult atmosphere to suit a more refined America. I guess you don't believe it either. You can Google right now, what is the age group that McDonald's targets, and you will find children and teenagers. It's always been like that. So, why did they start remodeling? Why would one of the biggest companies in America decide to spend over $1 billion on something where there's a possible failure? And that's where things started to get interesting. Let's start with the play spaces. If you remember correctly, McDonald's play spaces are never the same. Some of them were really fun, and I know I had my favorite play spaces and others that I liked less. Some were also very dangerous. The first nugget I was able to find was a play space in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which was a carousel. And it dated back to the 1980s and closed its doors only a few months after its opening. I couldn't find much info on why the play area was shut down. And the worst part is, since then, the place has remained vacant. If you know people in Lancaster, you may read an unauthorized article that was never approved for publication. The children played on the carousel inappropriately. They were children, so it wasn't surprising. One day, some children crawled under the carousel. But the problem is they never came out. The event was hushed up by McDonald's so that this story would not tarnish the company's reputation. To the point that it is extremely hard to find even one person who was present during this incident that afternoon. The only witness we could find said this. When they started crawling under the carousel, some of the parents started calling them. Then something happened with the lights. The carousel grew increasingly bright and the music became deafeningly loud. I ran outside of the building and the carousel started to smoke. When I looked through the window again to check on the children and employees, the employees were standing quietly behind the cash registers. It looked like they were patiently waiting for the arrival of new customers. Over the years, stories that were stranger than the next began to emerge. There were people who said they had seen children disappear into ball pits that weren't even a meter deep. Or stories of mothers searching for their children in different play tubes, only to find shoes or clothes. Strange things were happening beyond just the play areas. In 1996, in Knoxville, Tennessee, a businessman in his 40s went into a McDonald's bathroom and stayed there for 7 straight hours. Other customers said the businessman refused to leave the bathroom, which was located at the very back. Eventually, they ended up calling the police, who decided to break down the door. The man was forcibly taken away by the paramedics, as he still refused to vacate the bathroom. As they were dragging him outside, he was struggling and shouting, "Let me go back, I want to go back." And the very moment he passed through the restaurant doors, he fainted. When he woke up the next day, he had no memory of going to a McDonald's. The restaurant closed before anyone could investigate the incident in the bathrooms. However, customers using the bathrooms before him that day reported hearing whispering voices. Things such as, "It wasn't him, you have to go back," or "He saw you smile." In 1999 in Vermont, a cook walked into the restaurant and poured boiling frying oil over himself. Without screaming, without saying a single word, some of the customers started to laugh and roll in the boiling oil right next to him. They were all rushed to the burn unit. That one among them survived, but he always refused to testify. But one cannot accuse him of ill will. His throat had melted and had to be entirely replaced artificially. The restaurant manager said he didn't even remember hiring that employee, and that he wasn't on the official papers. According to him, his badge didn't even have a name on it. The page contained a series of nonsensical characters, like asterisks or hashes. Once again, the McDonald's was closed during the day. I grant you, everything I just told you sounds like urban legends. But the more stories I found, the more convinced I became. It was odd that whenever such accidents occurred, the McDonald's would shut down immediately. Towards the end of the 2000s, McDonald's began to demolish and rebuild every McDonald's where there had been an accident. Each and every one of them. But of course, they missed a few. I had an irresistible urge to go see it for myself. I recalled my childhood visits to McDonald's, but of course, that was well before the series of incidents began. There was a small town on the way to my family home, just off the highway. It was called Oroska. The tiny town, with a population not exceeding 100, appeared to have been entirely forgotten by the rest of the world. There was no reason to stop here, except to refuel or rest. There wasn't even any signage, not even to indicate that you were entering the town. I had to search for a while before finding this McDonald's, which had been awaiting remodeling since the 1970s. I'm fortunate to find a McDonald's in a place lacking both a supermarket and a post office. It was unexpected, so I went there over the weekend. As I was going to visit my parents, I decided to make a little stop at Oroska outdoors. Even though it was only 5 in the afternoon, it was already very dark, as it was winter. I was cold and in a bad mood, as I don't like driving at night, but I was determined. I couldn't have found this town without a global positioning system. The road leading to it was a dirt road with no signs. As I entered the small town, no lights were on. Even the street lights were mostly off. It appeared that after burning out, no one thought to replace the bulbs. The place truly felt stuck in the past. It wouldn't have surprised me if after the incident that happened at McDonald's, the residents had just decided to move or had all died of old age. In short, it really looked like a ghost town. I was about to lose hope when I finally saw him. The yellow M, however, was still in service, and it lit up the empty parking lot. The buzzing of the neon lights sounded like a dying bug zapper. Underneath, there was a sign that said, "Come eat our new McMuffins. We love to see you smile." I moved forward to the parking lot and parked haphazardly in it. When I got out of my car, I felt something soft and wet under my foot. There was a moldy hamburger. A greenish liquid was leaking from it. The smell was nauseating. I bent down to try to remove the hamburger from under my shoe. I realized the entire parking lot was covered in trash. There were half-eaten trays of fries and worn-out toys covered in grease. Everything was covered in a mix of snow and dirt. I hurried across the parking lot, and when I got close to the door, I noticed it was blocked by dirt. Someone had hung a paper on the door that said "Closed" in big red letters. While the sign inside clearly said "Open," I carefully pushed the door. An artificial bell rang as the door opened. It was McDonald's slogan jingle. I looked across the room lit by the fluorescent M, and saw that there was not a soul in sight. No one sitting at the tables and no one behind the counters. Someone had left a tray on one of the tables. That was the only clue that there had been customers recently. The interior was slightly cleaner. The counter toys were of the unknown characters. The place was entirely covered in yellow and red paint, and all the tables were made of wood. The wood seemed completely rotten to him. It looked like it had been covered with varnish to hide the misery. The most striking thing was the disgusting smell of burnt plastic. I approached the counter, not to order, but to ask a few questions. After waiting silently for 15 minutes, I ended up yelling, "Is there anyone there?" But all I got was my echo in response. I've encountered poor service at some McDonald's, but this was incomprehensible. But given the state of the place, I should have expected it. Just as I was about to give up and turn back, the cash register suddenly opened. It seemed to invite me to take what was inside. After all, I deserved a small reward for the time I had squandered here, right? So I went behind the counter and saw that it was filled with lots of bills. I quickly looked around to make sure no one was watching, and I reached inside, but the cash register immediately closed on my fingers. The metal dug deeply into my flesh, leaving a long trail of blood on the sides of the register. I screamed in pain. Across the counter, I saw that there was a first aid kit hanging on the kitchen wall. The bulbs were burned out in it, but I needed a bandage. And quickly, I jumped over the counter to reach the kitchen and walked towards the kit. The smell of burning was getting stronger and stronger. As I moved forward, I noticed that the grill was covered with a thick layer of grease. It was impossible that anyone had cooked in this kitchen recently. I walked past the deep fryers that were filled to the brim with oil, and inside floated hundreds of small glasses. I walked faster towards the first aid kit so I could treat myself quickly and get out of here. I began to realize that this restaurant was really no longer open to the public and that I should never have entered it. I opened the first aid kit and held back from vomiting. A cloud of stench came out of the box. The inside of it was filled with the same disgusting liquid and verdade who had come out of the hamburger I had stepped on in the parking lot. I started coughing and immediately put my hand over my mouth to keep from vomiting. The same ringing sound that I had heard after crossing the entrance rang out again behind me. I froze, trying to reassure myself by thinking that the bell must be defective. As I looked back, I noticed everything appeared more distant. Maybe I had been disoriented by the blood loss and the horrible smell coming from the kitchen. I looked down at my hand to check the state of my wound, and my eyes widened. There was no wound on my hand. I ran towards the counter in total panic, when something under the oven caught my foot and made me fall. My eyes started to adjust to the dim light, and I could see a figure appear. There was someone under the oven. I wondered if the person wasn't injured and needed help. So, I grabbed their hand and pulled to try to get them out from under the oven. But then, all that came out was half of a decomposing body. The corpse was wearing a McDonald's uniform. Their mouth was twisted in a disturbing rictus, but their eyes seemed to scream in terror. I tried to scream, but no sound came out of my mouth, like when you try to wake up from a bad dream. As I tried to get up as quickly as possible, the little light there began to fade. As the music of the bell began to become louder and louder, each note turning into a particularly gloomy melody. Once my hand was on the counter, I managed to get up, but I froze. I hadn't looked since I came in. Outside the restaurant, there was a playground. The void that separated the restaurant from the playground was covered with 100 little bloody hands. A viscous red fluid with apparent flesh bits oozed from the slide. There were ropes hanging from the Monkey Bridge bar, and the ropes of about 10 McDonald's employees were hanging there. Around the tables, there were skeletons in front of trays of decomposing food. I looked on in horror, too shocked to move. Then suddenly, the restaurant was plunged into darkness. And, in the center of the play area, a bright light came on. That's when I noticed a ball pit so full that it was struggling to contain everything. And that's also where the smell of burnt plastic was coming from. Because the heat from the light was too strong, it was melting the balls. These started to move and overflow from the edge, and I noticed that there was something moving inside. I really wanted to run, but my body refused to obey me. And as quickly as it had started, the music stopped, and so did the movement inside the pool. I watched for several seconds in silence, and then a yellow glove began to slowly emerge from the pool, moving its fingers in a strange way. Then the sleeve began to appear. Little by little, I discovered the colors of it. Red, then white, then red again, stripes that slowly began to show. Then gradually, everything accelerated. The arm rose and rose in a supernatural way until it reached several meters in height, until its hand touched the bulb. Then slowly, he began to unscrew it. I started to run, knocking everything in my path, and he managed to unscrew it. As I reached the entrance, I charged the door so violently that I shattered the glass. As I reached the parking lot, I heard a scream from the restaurant. And suddenly, something whispered right next to my ear. The distorted voice resembled the warped melody of the restaurant's entrance bells. It told me, "Come back soon, I would like to see you smile." Until today, I haven't spoken to anyone about that night. Days later, an online article reported that a massive fire in Orozco had burned the whole town. I don't know if it was to hide evidence or something else, but one thing is for sure, I had no intention of going back there to find out. If I'm sharing this story with you today, it's not because I have any desire to find out more. I'm sharing it only to warn as many people as possible. I'm not telling you not to go to the new McDonald's to buy your Big Macs or High McFlurry, but if you see one of the old McDonald's, don't go there. I need to stop talking now and go take my painkillers. My hand is itching more and more, but what hurts me is my jaw. I remember those words he whispered in my ear. I don't know what he did to me, but it's working. My jaw is twisting more and more into a forced grimace that I can't control. Dare me to see you smile.